All right, so here we go. Part two of the SCAL method, a sound mind, right? Now, we want to kind of go over three main things here when it comes to a sound mind, right? What is a sound mind? Why do we want it? And how do we train it? Or how do we train to get it? Okay, so we're going to start off with a verse, of course, in the Bible, because we're going back there, right? 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. There we go. So, for God hath not given us the spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Now, what is a sound mind, right? We're going to start there, and let's offer a little bit of context for this particular verse, right? So this letter, the second letter to Timothy, was actually written to Timothy by Paul when he was in prison, right? And I think this is one of the last few letters he wrote to anyone before he was executed. And I think he was beheaded, I believe, right? That's just on as an aside. But anyway, this was one of the last things he wrote to Timothy. Timothy was basically, he was charged with spreading the gospel upon Paul's departure, right? So, Paul was kind of training him up. Like, hey, look, man, this is what you got to do. So what Paul is saying here, again, just offering a little bit more context to the verse itself. What Paul is saying here is he's telling Timothy to stand on business because the Spirit of the Lord is in you, right? And that's that could be taken and used in multiple different areas and places of your life, right? Stand on business because the Spirit of the Lord is in you. And it's very interesting because Timothy, at this point in time, he was shy. Timothy was timid, right? He was unsure of himself. So in that particular verse, in that letter, Paul was basically telling Timothy, don't be scared. Stand on business because the Spirit of the Lord is in you, right? It was like, so don't be fearful in emotion, but you understand that the Spirit of the Lord gives you power, gives you power of love and of a sound mind. So a clear thinking, rational mind. So let's also kind of dig a little bit more into the idea or the word sound mind. That's translated from a Greek word sophronismos. I believe I'm saying that. I could be jacking that all up actually. But it basically means disciplined, self-controlled. And it's actually a combination of two words, which mean to save and to control. And as a quick aside here, when we're talking about a sound heart, that the word sound means free from damage, not easily wavered, at peace, right? When we're talking about sound mind, sound means similar things, but also means disciplined and self-controlled. So I found that like one of the greatest compliments that you can give someone is to call them a sound individual. And it doesn't sound like much. It doesn't sound like much at all, but it doesn't sound like much, but it's packed with so much meaning. I'll never forget, years ago, I used to work at UPS. I was started off as an unloader, whatever, and then I moved to a sorter, and I was just on the other side. I would grab packages, put them down in little belts and all that fun stuff. It was a cool crew I used to work with back then. That's before I had facial hair, actually. And listen, I didn't have facial hair until I was in like my mid-20s, so whatever. But I was a sorter, and I will never forget this one dude. He was older. He was around like 52, 53, something. He was in his 50s, and just working, sorting, doing the same things that I'm doing. I mean, I looked way more gassed than he did, and it was just interesting. But we would always have these talks. And always ended up leaning more towards, the ideas and talks of philosophy. And then, we will often talk about who we ultimately wanted to be and what we were working for. And I'll never forget, it was one of the last conversations I actually had with him because I moved on. But he called me a sound individual. And I was just like, oh, thanks. And I just kept it pushing. it really didn't hit me until just recently, honestly, how big of a compliment that is. And yeah, I just didn't think about it like that way, because it doesn't sound like much up front. But that to call someone that, I think, is a great compliment. So a sound mind is a moderate thinking mind. It is a controlled mind, a mind that isn't controlled by emotion. In fact, a sound mind is controlled by the spirit. A sound mind actually drives our emotions. It is a discerning mind that is rational in its perception, its comprehension, its judgment, and its decision making. But here's the tough part. The tough part is none of us are born with a sound mind. A sound mind is something that we have to actually work to develop. All right, there's that word work again. We have to work to develop a sound mind. And it's unfortunate because, again, when we're looking at modern times, it seems like in modern times, people are less concerned with working to achieve a sound mind than they are with simply feeling good and feeling good about themselves and making it all about them. Why do you want a sound mind? Well, first and foremost, it keeps your emotions in check, right? So your mind, a sound mind, is basically the ultimate training tool for your emotions. And I've said this before, right? Your mind is your heart's personal trainer. And listen, your heart doesn't always want to listen to your mind. Your heart doesn't always want to do what your mind is telling it to do, right? You feel the way you feel, but then you can't necessarily just respond and react and act on strictly how you feel. You need some rational thought in there. And that's kind of like, it's comparable to the personal trainer client relationship, right? You go to a personal trainer because they're going to help you get to a point where you might not be able to get on your own, and they're going to kind of force you to do or motivate you to do things that you wouldn't do otherwise, right? But that are ultimately in your favor, that benefit you, right? Now, if you ask a couple other people, maybe some of my clients, they'd be like, my personal trainer gets on my nerves. I'm pretty sure your mind gets on your heart's nerves. so so whatever, right? But that's the idea. That's what, first, it keeps your emotions in check. A sound mind also encourages us to think critically, right? And that kind of seems to be in short supply nowadays, right? But it encourages us to think critically, and it forces us to find, create, and develop more mature ways of thinking. This also is what leads to wisdom. Now, from a Christian perspective, wisdom is supposed to be sought out, right? You have the whole book. Well, actually, you have a lot of books, but like the whole book of Proverbs talks about wisdom, but it opens up with heralding basically the benefits of wisdom and why we should seek wisdom, right? Seek wisdom, and kind of go from there. So we have to kind of discuss what is wisdom exactly, right? So wisdom is, and I'm gonna word this differently in a number of different ways, rather. So knowledge of what is true and right, coupled with just judgment, right? So that there's multiple kinds of wisdom here, right? There's human wisdom, and the first thing I think about when it comes to human wisdom is the wisdom of the streets. The streets definitely have some form of wisdom. It's kind of hard to explain, but there's definitely a wisdom of the hood, right? But that lines up with human wisdom. Again, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. But even outside of that, so there's human wisdom, there's demonic wisdom. So there's understanding that's as demonic in nature, that I don't mess with at all, but it's It exists, right? At least if you're reading the Bible, it says that it exists, right? So then there's also the one that we should seek out the most, godly wisdom, right? And to explain godly wisdom, I'm just going to read a verse here, right? I'm going to the book of James, chapter 3, I'll start with verse 16. So James 3:16. Is that right? Yeah, James 3:16. I was almost getting that twisted up with John 3:16, but anyway, James 3:16 says, "For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work. But the wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, gentle, and easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without partiality and without hypocrisy." And I'll just read one verse later here in verse 18 says, "And the fruit of the righteousness is sown in peace of them that make peace." So basically, godly wisdom is handed out. So how is it handed out though? So it's not like human wisdom or even demonic wisdom, right? It's not just free flowing, right? Proverbs tells you that we ought to seek wisdom. So what kind of wisdom was Solomon talking about there? He was talking about godly wisdom. So you only get godly wisdom by seeking God. But I'm not going to turn this into a giant Bible study or anything like that. But that's a crucial point when trying to understand wisdom and its uses and its application, right? So another definition is the ability to think and act using knowledge, experience, understanding, and insight. And I guess what that does is it combines multiple different, so it combines cognitive elements, it combines reflective elements, right? So you're using your thinking, but you're using your observation as well to be able to see what's going on. And it's also using some social elements, right? So, especially when it pertains to like, this is where your compassion and your empathy comes from, right? So it combines all of those elements. That's what wisdom does, right? And you're making it an action, or you're fine-tuning your thinking in that way to line up with those elements, utilizing those elements. But keep in mind, when gaining wisdom, when aiming at wisdom or looking to develop wisdom, however you want to say it, it's almost entirely a outward thinking process. So that's why people who spend most of their times in their own thoughts and don't really and like, I almost call them like their thought bubbles, right? They spend almost all of their time within their own thought bubbles, and they never really look outside of that. And so they don't really understand anything outside of their own perspective. And that's the majority of modern times now anyway. And I seem like I have a bone to pick with modern times, but I kind of do, right? So, but it's just like, that's the result of not really looking outside of your own perspective, right? And you don't really gain wisdom without it. Another reason why you would want to achieve a sound mind, why you will want to possess a sound mind, is because a sound mind leads to better outcomes for generations after you. Now, give me a moment to kind of break that down a little bit first, right? So the process goes like this, right? It starts off with your perception or your comprehension, right? That's where you perceive or comprehend something. That's where your wisdom resides as well, right? And the next thing you do, you make a judgment. And so, and let's, kind of clear this up a little bit. I don't mean like judgment as in like, you're judging me because I'm this, or you're judging me because of that. Like, no, has nothing to do with that. Judgment in this case means evaluation. So you're evaluating what you perceived and what you comprehended, right? Then from that point comes a decision to be made. You're making a decision. That's where the action comes from. So when all of those things are in line and all of those things are sound and all of those things end up producing good outcomes, they don't necessarily just produce good outcomes for you. They produce good outcomes for people after you. Because this is how societies end up building or collapsing. Terrible decision making or wonderful decision making. But either or, that decision making is lined up based on that process. They perceive, they comprehend, they make a judgment or an evaluation, and then they make a decision, right? So having a sound mind for you within your home, wherever you are, actually affects everyone around you, and it will affect people after you. And I know I don't want to make that seem like it's such like a dramatically big deal, but it is a big deal because things don't change on a grand scale without things changing on a micro scale first. And because we have this setup in this way where you perceive, comprehend, you make a judgment, then you make a decision, a sound mind cannot be manipulated. I repeat, a sound mind cannot be manipulated. And finally, on a more personal level or a more individual level, having a sound mind leads to better mental fitness, which leads to better emotional fitness, which also leads to better physical fitness. So that's why it fits perfectly in with the SCAL. That's why it's one of the pillars of the SCAL method, because it's absolutely important for you to have a sound mind in order to achieve all of your health and wellness goals. So now the question is, how do you train it? Or how do you train to get to it? So to achieve a sound mind, the first 3 or 4 things that I'm going to mention here, I've mentioned in other episodes already. One of them being meditation, right? That's how you train to get a sound mind, right? If you go back to how to, I think it was with episode 3 of Sound Heart when I said meditation was for suckers, but then I got good at it, right? I detail the different forms of meditation that I do. So the thing is, meditation is crucial in this instance for a sound mind. You actually have to sit back and think. You actually have to be still. And that's kind of like, 1A and then be still is 1B, right? There's value in stillness. There's value in just sitting back and observing. There's value in not saying anything and watching, okay? That meditation is key. Go back to that episode, listen to that segment, watch that video, whatever you need to do, right? But meditation is one. The next is prayer, of course, right? Prayer, absolutely, right? But if you're not the religious sort, that's perfectly fine. You can skip over that part. But there is a lot of value in prayer. There's a lot of value in connecting to a loving God. But I won't dig too, again, I'm not trying to turn this into a Bible study, but I'll leave that there for you, okay? Another is to use tactics like reframing, right? I also speak of that in A Sound Heart, right? So go back and listen to that episode again. I'm probably going to have to put links in all this stuff. And then another, and a major one, is to, without mercy, ruthlessly eliminate negativity. And while you're at it, take a hatchet to sin, okay? So you achieve a sound mind by getting rid of the things that cause chaos in your mind. For a lot of people, their own negative thoughts cause them stress. So what I propose to you here is to achieve a sound mind, you eliminate the negativity. And again, while you're at it, eliminate the sin. Because a lot of times that sin will lead to the negativity anyway. So last but not least, you achieve a sound mind, and I hinted at it earlier, you achieve a sound mind by beefing up your critical thinking skills. And now, again, that's going to be the whole random topic. But the ability to critically think is vital to achieving a sound mind. And that's it. That is a sound mind for you, right? Now, you can kind of consider the random topic that I'm about to go into, talking about critical thinking, an offshoot of this sound mind main topic. Okay, but take that information, run with it, start building up these practices in your life, right? Start eliminating that negativity, start understanding and setting up practices so that you can perceive and comprehend better, so that you can make better judgment or evaluations. And then therefore at that point, so that you can make better decisions. Because not only does your vitality, not only does your well-being depend on it, but the well-being of others around you depend on it. And the generations after you absolutely depend on you having a sound mind. All right, let's go. Let's get to this critical thinking random topic that's not so random. So if you like this segment, here's another one for you. Click over here. And if you want the entire podcast, go this way. Click on that one right there. And once again, I appreciate you. All right, you take it easy.